Hello buds. Today's video is going to be sort of different. More of a yap fest, if you will. Today we're going to be talking about Hamlet. We're going to cover what the world of Hamlet is, the pig lore that it introduces, and of course, what the apocalypse is, and why the apocalypse is. Alright, let's begin. So before we talk about the lost lore that plagues Hamlet, let's talk about its setting. Hamlet takes place on a mountainous archipelago. You've got the four main mountaintops, then the Pinnacle Island. On an elevation map, we would be able to see that this island, which also happens to be the BFB's nesting site, is much higher than the other four islands. All of these islands, except for the aforementioned Pinnacle Island, are connected by an ancient ruins network. There are also two major pig cities, Swinesbury, ran by a Mayor Truffleston, and Palace City, where the Queen of the Pigs resides, Queen Malfalfa. The ecosystem here is very reminiscent of a tropical rainforest. There is no major temperature swings, rather there's a dry season, which is called temperate season, a wet season, called humid season, and finally, after the wet season, the plants all bloom and begin reproducing, and that is called lush season. All of this happens very much like our real-life jungles. Using this information, we can pinpoint that the setting for Hamlet takes place in a tropical rainforest. But not just any tropical rainforest. Due to the architecture, mountainous cities, and the existence of a doomsday calendar, I think that Hamlet takes place in a world identical to our real-world Mayan mountains, which are located in southern Belize. It shares the same geography, seasonal cycle, and has clear inspirations. But that's all real-world stuff. What about the Don't Starve lore? Well, I'm getting to that right now. I just had to talk about the setting so that you all knew what we were getting into. First, let's talk about what Hamlet means about the pigs. Pigmen have always been a hot debate topic in Don't Starve. I'm sure I'm not the only player to come across these guys and think, why do they have a big ol' king? Why are they so dumb despite being humanoid? So many questions, and what felt like no answers. Then, Hamlet came out, and finally, everything was made clear. Clearer, because people still couldn't figure out how this became this. Now, you might be wondering, how am I confident that the Pig King came after the pig citizens of Hamlet and not vice versa? Well, that's thanks to this loading screen. In its text, it states that, legend has it, the Pig King and his followers left their home long ago to rule freely in the Constant. With how advanced the pig citizens of Hamlet are, it's pretty safe to bet that Hamlet is their homeworld, and the Pig King and his followers defected from this. Maybe they were tired of paying taxes, or maybe the king himself just wanted a position of power, but either way, the Pig King and pigs of Don't Starve's mainland are a direct offshoot of Hamlet. Oh yeah, and Wilba, a playable native of Palace City, also kind of proves this by calling the Pig King a traitor pig. Most likely her trying to say the word traitor, which sounds similar in the English language because our language is not complicated at all, totally. Anyways, we're definitely not done talking about the pigs because we have a few more questions that still need answered. Like, why are the pigs down here so much less civilized than up in the archipelagos of Hamlet? Now, I'll give you guys a fair warning here. We're gonna be entering theory territory rather than official confirmed lore, but here's the theory that I have. Perhaps the king and his followers left during an earlier time during the pig's evolution in Hamlet. This will be supported by something that I'll talk about in detail a little later. Another idea I had is that maybe because the pigs were closer to the shadows, they were corrupted by them, and that's why they become werepigs during a full moon, but this wouldn't make sense because Wilba, a Palace City native, can also become a werepig if she isn't wearing any silver. So it's more likely that werepigism is a curse that all pigmen suffer from, but the citizens of Hamlet are smart enough to wear some type of silver to counteract this. Most likely under their clothing if it's not apparent on their person. And if you're wondering why the king doesn't transform, it's most likely because of this horn earring right here. It looks pretty silver to me. So we know that every pig in the Constant is connected primarily to this place right here. But if that's the case, then what are the Hamlet pigs' origins? Well, to answer that, let's take a look at the ruins. All evidence points to the pigs originally looking a lot more similar to what we know on the mainland. Palace City's ruins are decorated with what looks like a standard pigman, not the standard city dweller. The ruins themselves also give us some insight onto how the ancient pigs worked. We know that thanks to the Blue Sow, an ancient relic, that the pigs always had some type of monarchy. But we also can see, thanks to the Lost Idol, that maybe different tribes of the pigs existed. Because here's the thing, The lost idol is wearing headwear that strangely correlates to the Pugilisk ruins. So perhaps there may have been a society that already defected from the crown, a society that based itself around the Fountain of Youth or something like that. Perhaps this is even where the Pig King and his crew originated from. I mean, the Pig King is immortal, and you can't kill him. So he could be among the few that were given the option of drinking from the Fountain of Youth. I mean, okay, this next part is kind of a stretch, but if you do look at the Pig King, the headwear is spiky. I mean, there you go. So we've got two societies, or even potentially one society that is together but separated. The monarch pigs that lived on Palace City, and the pigs that lived near the Fountain of Youth, who do not really have a defined system. But you know what? What else did these ancient pigs get up to? We know that they were at least attempting communications with the Manse. In one of the pig ruins, we can see an artifact called the Pharaoh Stone, which allows its holder to communicate with the Manse, but not much is known about why this was being made. Clearly, whatever plans for friendship did fall through, unfortunately, as Manse are still hostile to Wilba, and Wilba, likewise, is not very nice to Manse. And of course, we can't talk about ancient pigs without talking about this room. Yeah, the Apocalypse Calendar. The ancients of Hamlet knew that the world was going to end, and judging by the fact that the Herald himself, the harbinger of the apocalypse, can summon their spirits at will, perhaps they even worshipped the apocalypse, or inversely the Herald. Not inversely, but additively, I don't know how to say that. Strangely, the only way to find this room and gain control over the end of the world is to find it hidden behind a wall, suggesting that the ancients attempted to hide this information. But from who is the question? Because even though this apocalypse calendar is hidden, the denizens of Swinesbury and Palace City can sense when the apocalypse is coming, as they'll comment on it up to 7 days before it happens. Now, we've talked about the apocalypse a good bit here, and it's very interesting, and I'm very, very certain that we're going to be talking about it much more here in a second. But this is the pig segment, so let's go ahead and stick to the pigs and talk a little bit about the current system they have, and a few other relics. So, on the relics category, while you're playing the game, you may come across a creature called the Queen Womant. She has the crown that originally belonged to the Pig Queen. How did she get this? Is there a super secret lore reason? No, there's not. Wilba literally just lost the crown and it must have been retrieved by a mant or something, and the same can be said about the Royal Scepter. It can be found on Pinnacle Island, near the BFB's nest, so it's reasonable to assume that the scepter was lost and the BFB, assuming it was a cool stick, took it home. And the jeweled truffle? Well, there's no official lore or quotes that tells us anything about this one, but we know that it was probably important to the ancient pigs, due to the fact that the lost totem depicts what I assume to be a map to the truffle. The truffles being a type of mushroom if you weren't aware. The blue sow appears to be the only special relic with lore significance, at least via quotes. Funny enough, the blue sow can only be found in the ruins connecting to the Fountain of Youth, so it's most likely that the pigs that were a part of the Fountain of Youth tribe, or whatever it was, still obeyed the crown. Otherwise, I'm not sure why they would have a shrine to the monarchy in their ruins, but that's enough about the ancients, because now it's time to ask the real question. How did the pigs go from this to this? Well, that's simple. Evolution. We know that evolution is canon in the Constant thanks to some of Maxwell's quotes, because a lot of the creatures he originally created in his time as the Shadow King have evolved or changed from his previous design. So it's not completely crazy to assume that they simply evolved into the more humanoid creatures we can see in-game. Now, I know what you may be thinking. If the pigs of Hamlet evolved, then why are the pigs of the mainland Constant still tiny in comparison and kind of dumber? Well, I mean, that's just a sign of adaptation. If you put two separate species in two different environments, they will both evolve completely differently. Food and other commodities are much more available on the mainland Constant than in the world of Hamlet. So the Pig King and his supporters simply didn't need to adapt to the environment. Simple housing, simple farms, and simple community values were really all they needed, while the citizens of Hamlet had bigger threats. You've got bats, the apocalypse, and food is much scarcer. This promotes a more market economy, which would divide the food based on labor and wealth, rather than abundance like you see with the Pig Kings group, who don't have an economy system. Basically, the city of Hamlet became a much larger capitalist landscape, while the Pig King and his crew decided to stay small and socialist. Both of them still have a monarchy, however, and judging by the stature of the Pig King, it definitely seems like he receives a much higher share of the food. so it's by no means equal with either group. But without going into too heavy headcanon or theory crafting, that's basically all we know about the pigs and their connection to Hamlet. There's a few things I didn't cover, like the fact that the Pig King has a topiary in Palace City sometimes, but that can be wrote off as him simply being a folklore legend around the palace, since I assume they also have ways of getting off the mountaintops, but they simply don't go there because it's more comfortable in Hamlet. Or the Merm and Pig War, but that can also be explained as territory disputes. You know, the Merms coming from the Gorge want to settle the same lands that the Pig King wants to settle. But you know what, that's enough pig talk. Let's go ahead and talk about the much more juicy thing that I'm sure all of you are interested in. The Apocalypse is a feature added in Hamlet connected to a doomsday clock that slowly counts down as soon as you start your playthrough. The clock is on a 60-day timer, so every 60 days, the world goes through what's known as the Apocalypse. The moon blocks out the sun, the shadows come out, and everything becomes hellish. But why is the Apocalypse even a thing? Well, here's my theory, but again, we're moving into theory crafting here, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. Except for the supporting stuff, because I will be giving supporting arguments. As we know thanks to Maxwell's quotes, he was responsible for most of the creatures existing, in both the mainland and, surprisingly, shipwrecked. But something interesting is that he doesn't seem to recognize Hamlet all that much, suggesting that the entire world of Hamlet developed outside of the reach of the Shadow Ruler. However, this doesn't mean that shadows aren't present in its ecosystem. If we take a look at the lore of the ancients of the mainland, we know that they were a bug-like people who worshipped Alter, the moon. Yet they went crazy themselves after consuming too much nightmare fuel, eventually forming what we know today as the Shadows. That's hugely oversimplified, by the way. There's a lot more that happens with them, but this is a Hamlet video, so I'm trying to make it quick. The thing that I'm trying to get to is, the Apocalypse has one figurehead, the Ancient Herald, who has a striking resemblance to these ancients. So who is he? Where did he come from? Like I said, it's clear that the ancients from Hamlet were aware of the shadows meddling with its world, and perhaps the Herald was a direct offshoot from the shadows from the mainland. Kind of like a reverse of the pigmen. The pigs went to the mainland, and the shadows came to Hamlet. You know, that type of stuff. Maybe the pigs going to the mainland is what tipped the shadows off that there's more land out there or something too. Who knows? Now, why the Apocalypse awakens the Herald is more simple. Shadows like dark. Moon blocks sun equals now the surface is dark. Or in this case, it provides a deep red glow which allows the shadows to connect to the world of Hamlet more permanently. But hold up. Isn't the moon supposed to provide lunar energy? Shouldn't the solar eclipse make Alter more powerful and not the shadows? Well, yes, that's true, but remember that Don't Starve Hamlet takes place before the events of Don't Starve Together. Alter's not technically awake yet, so the idea of lunar energy simply doesn't exist, or it's too weak to do anything. In the events of single-player Don't Starve, shadows have a complete monopoly on power. Maxwell 1, Charlie 0, I guess. And if you aren't happy with that theory, I do have another one. But I feel it's less likely due to the fact that we've not seen anything about it in Don't Starve Together. Maybe, and hear me out, there's actually two moons. A lunar moon and a shadow moon. It makes no sense. But the lunar moon is the one we see every day in the Constant, while the shadow moon is strictly limited to these doomsday events. Like I said, I don't personally believe this theory, but the Apocalypse calendar does depict what looks like two moons, so I don't know. I mean, maybe we'll get an evil, messed up version of Alter in the future. Now let's talk about this. Gameplay-wise, the Apocalypse is permanent for the first time you encounter it, and then after you reach the calendar, it sets itself to occur for only 20 days, and then automatically resets itself. I like to think that there's a good lore reason for this, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is Wormwood. As we all know, thanks to the events of Don't Starve Together, the moon is actually an entity known as Alter. Alter is responsible for many things within the Constant, and is the figurehead for the Lunar Shadow War on the lunar side. But another thing is that Wormwood is Alter's direct child. Wormwood was born from a magic gem that fell off of the sleeping giant, and the Shadows probably knew of this. How? Well, remember, the ancients worshipped the moon. They knew that Alter existed, they simply weren't awake yet. Perhaps they were aware of Wormwood's coming, and that's why they sent the Herald to rule over the shadows of Hamlet. The Herald, fearing Wormwood, probably decided to make the next Apocalypse the true end of Hamlet, instead of the standard 20-day cycle. But again, that's just a theory that has some holes, naturally. Like, why does resetting the calendar reset the 20-day cycle? Well, yeah, I can't really answer that. I'm doing the best with what Clay has given me here, but I think that's the closest to what I could get. It's either that or it's just a gameplay thing, which, come on, you guys want me to say something more interesting than just, oh, this was gameplay reasons. The Apocalypse doesn't just make way for the Herald, it also allows the Shadows to possess many of the lower life forms in Hamlet. Pogs get creepy red eyes, Mants become warrior Mants with a distinct red glow, and even Picos become highly aggressive. The Apocalypse itself is truly, well, apocalyptic. Now begs the question though, why don't the pig citizens just send guards out to turn the Apocalypse off like you can as the playable character? The answer to that may be simple. Remember, the Apocalypse is standardly only on a 20-day cycle, and while the ancient pigs knew about it, over the years as the kingdom evolved, perhaps they lost their roots, so to say. And forgetting about the calendar, thanks to it being sealed away, they've just sort of gotten used to being stuck inside for 20 days every now and then. I mean, we know they are aware of it, they say when it's about to happen, and if they could do something about it, they clearly would. They have weapons and the ability to speak, so I'm almost certain this is simply due to the fact that they've lost their roots. Perhaps the modern pig cities we see are a different branch of the early pigs, a branch that didn't worship or track the Apocalypse and the Herald, and as such, they simply just don't even know that the calendar exists. There's one more thing I'd like to talk about. The bosses. Bosses in Don't Starve Hamlet aren't just loreless cannon fodder. Each one sort of tells a story. We've already covered the Ancient Herald in as much depth as possible, but what about the other three? Well, the Queen Womant is pretty simple. She's a queen ant who is also suspiciously as large as a queen termite. Nothing too special here. The other two, however, ooh, they are juicy. Let's start with the Pugilisk. Now, you can find this guy defending the Fountain of Youth. But why? Well, if you look at the fountain, the Pugilisk is depicted as the provider of the magic water that runs through the Fountain of Youth, and perhaps it's actually the sole guardian of the waters. The pigs here seem to have likely worshipped the beast, and maybe were deemed worthy to drink from it. Us as the playable character though, we're not exactly fond of tradition. Taking the water immediately wakes up the beast. If we take a closer look at the Pugilisk's attacks as well, it definitely takes inspiration from folklore. You have the long, snaky body, an attack that's capable of freezing you with its eyesight, almost like a Gorgon of sorts. It's just like 100 times less lethal because you don't turn into stone. The Pugilisk is cool, really cool, but it doesn't even hold a candle to, you guessed it, the Iron Hulk. This creature right here may change everything that I've just talked about. I don't even know where to begin with this guy. Okay, so in the world of Hamlet, you'll find the Iron Hulk scattered around what's conveniently labeled battlefield biomes, showing that maybe some type of large-scale battle happened here. But against who? Well, let's look at the Iron Hulk in detail to find out. On its own, the Iron Hulk is really cool. It's got a multitude of attacks and can even shoot lasers, but that alone tells us nothing. It's not until you realize that the Iron Hulk is the only creature in the game that can damage shadow creatures that things start to paint a picture here. Yes, you heard that right. The Iron Hulk is the only, well, okay, it's one of the only non-playable characters that can damage shadow creatures. The others are greater gestalts. So this is very curious indeed. Clay wouldn't have added that ability in for no reason, especially because almost every other creature simply cannot even interact with shadow creatures. So why is the Iron Hulk capable of this? Well, let's look back at the pig's history. After uncovering this evidence, I have two theories. Number one is a bit more outlandish, but it's really fun. Maybe the residents of Palace City in Swinesbury didn't simply outgrow their natives, maybe they actually actively waged war against them. Okay, hear me out. Palace City started as a more civilized offshoot of whatever tribe of pigs worship the Herald and the Apocalypse, and probably the Pugilisk. Then, being expansionist, they settled the town of Swinesbury. The problem? Swinesbury was very close to not only the Herald area, but also the Fountain of Life. Now, I'm not sure who would have shot first in this scenario, but you'll only find battlefield biomes on Swinesbury Island, nowhere else. This could suggest that the tribes made the first strike, and perhaps they were infused with nightmare fuel, much like the ancients of the mainland. This would require the town of Swinesbury to create a super weapon, or risk being destroyed. Hey man, I don't know. It's a cool movie plot or something. Maybe I should get back into my dumb little cringe movie making era because that sounds really fun. But of course, the other theory I have is far more tame. We know the apocalypse has happened many times, and the citizens are aware of its existence. So perhaps maybe the Iron Hulk was an invention to attempt to keep their island safe. That wouldn't exactly explain why the battlefield biome exists only on Swinesbury Island though. Maybe they made it and then realized it was too destructive and kind of just left it there. I'm still skeptical about this one, plus it's not as cool of a backstory as the other ones. I mean, you get a giant war machine that potentially wiped out an entire group versus a boring old defense bot. I know what would make a cooler boss battle myself. Either way, Hamlet is very rich with potential lore and even official lore. It gives us insight into how the pigs were born, how a world untouched by Maxwell could have evolved, and how a world where shadows reign supreme could turn out. If we ever were allowed to go to Hamlet post-Ultra Awakening, I wonder if everything would be lunar mutated. I mean, Hamlet is geographically closest to the moon, so it would make sense, but those are questions that are simply impossible to answer unless Clay themselves tell us what's going on. I hope you all enjoyed this video. It's been a while since I've done lore stuff, so if you enjoyed it, leaving a like, subscribing if you haven't already, and commenting an, I guess, otter emoji down below would mean a ton. If you want to learn more about, let's see. WX, there we go, that's a fun character. Go ahead and click on this video right here. Come on, you know you want to. Click it. Oh crap, you took too long.